At number 10, we have got the Galley, and I'm sorry to all Syntac lovers out there, or just Galley lovers out there, or maybe Syntac himself if he's even watching this video, because the Galley is a staple creature for him, but for me, I really just don't like this as a creature. It doesn't really have much use to me, and it is so irritating and annoying to tame. Not necessarily just because it is a difficult tame, it's not actually a hugely difficult tame, apart from the fact they die so often when taming one. You'll need trank darts instead of trank arrows. If you use trank arrows, you're just going to kill one of these things. Once you have one, their weight isn't actually that great, so you're probably not actually going to be able to get loads of resources across the map at the speed that a Gallimimus can just go at default, because this is their default speed. Yes, albeit pretty quick, but still, considering their health and their feebleness in everything else, they really just aren't a good creature, and they're not worth the tame whatsoever. And their saddle was actually kind of expensive for what they do as well, although that doesn't make a bad creature. It's just another deficit again, which again makes these creatures just even less enticing to use for me. You can always just use like the Procoptodon, which was just there. That is a much better creature, which is just so much more robust in all of its features, and the Galley just doesn't have that, and it's kind of a shame, because there's an essence of community with this creature, with obviously YouTubers like Syntac, but most people kind of know you don't really tame the Galley, you kind of avoid this creature, and it's a little bit of the meme. And I was actually going to put the Dodo here instead, but I can't do that to the Dodo, can I? And also the Dodo is really useful for simple kibble, so it definitely isn't deserving on the list. Unlike the AI list, which put the Dodo right in the #1 spot. Definitely would not do that. Next up, we have got the Paky, and this creature kind of had to be here when you think of it. Like, this creature is so unnecessarily long to tame with its actual tame. It's not very difficult to tame. It's not like the process is complicated. It takes ages to tame these things, and they're not even particularly useful. They can't even gather berries, and their kind of one use could be dealing torpor, but it's in such a controlled little area, and also it'll do more damage than actual torpor. They still don't deal a lot of damage. Anyway, it's just not worth using these creatures for that use, and they're just really slow and not particularly useful for absolutely anything. If they're a berry gatherer, then maybe it would improve a lot, and possibly I'm being pretty dumb, but I have never been able to gather berries with these things, and I'm pretty sure you can't. If you could, then tell me down below, and my opinion might change these things slightly, but still, I really don't think they're good tames. It's just a waste of a position. Get yourself a parasol that can gather berries, and they are so much of a better creature in the early game. Like, yeah, it could kill a raptor, but it took like over a minute for it to do this. Obviously, I had to edit the video so it would actually fit in the b-roll, but it's just really not a good creature. Don't tame one. Next up, we have got the Archaopteryx, and I'm just putting this thing here partly because its taming food is unnecessary. It uses chitin. Really? Why? Also, these things spawn in the redwoods, not the friendliest biome to tame in, and since the glide suit came out, they really aren't useful, so I have to put them in the Worst Ark Creatures list, as there is absolutely no use for these creatures anymore whatsoever. This creature is useless. To carry this thing around, it's just a slog, and you can't really get much use out of it. Just get a normal flyer. It's actually easier to get a Pteranodon than one of these things, as the biome when you tame one of these things isn't particularly friendly, and a Pteranodon is going to be so much better than this creature, or even like any just flyer or glider. It's gonna like wipe this thing out of the park. There is no use for this creature to be in Ark. But also, the cinema crops exist, so this doesn't need to be here. At number 7, we have got the Mcorpor, and again, we kind of have a useless creature. This thing can't really do anything in particular at all, and obviously, maybe, yeah, you could use it to knock players off of mounts. There are just better creatures like the Desmodus can pick players off of mounts, and it still is quite a finicky use case, and it doesn't work very well or effectively. There really is not a huge use for these creatures to be used in that scenario, so they're just pretty obsolete, and again, not the friendliest to tame because they often come in packs, and they're just an absolute pain to deal with, kind of like Palovias, although Palovias do have a slight use. So obviously, I'm not putting the general Palovia on this list. They don't need to be here. Next up, we have got the Oviraptor. Some people might say this is an unpopular opinion to put here, as surely the Archaeopteryx and the Mcorpor are less useful than this thing, as it kind of increases the rate that eggs will be laid by creatures, but it isn't an essential thing to me, at least, and maybe to people that do want loads of them. I have a feeling it's not going to make the biggest difference. Maybe the oviraptor is an insane creature to you, but the taming method is pretty unnecessary, and I really don't like these things as a creature, and I think their use case is kind of pretty useless, like the Dimetrodon and incubating eggs. Just use air conditioners. I know there isn't really an alternative for this creature. I just think it's really useless. Next up, we have got the Areno, and this creature is so useless. Like, its tame method is a really annoying passive tame, and on top of that as well, it just really doesn't have much use of a creature. I'm going to put the Titanoboa here as well, as it kind of follows under a similar league. Obviously not the same tame method as Titanoboa's tame method, is arguably even worse, and that creature is arguably even less useful, especially considering the new kibble system, whereas before it did actually have a use, and nowadays it doesn't. Just these two creatures, they can't do anything. They're unnecessary tames, and there's no use to these things being in the art game at all. Maybe if the Areno could climb walls and the Titanoboa was still useful for kibble, they wouldn't be here on this list, but they're useless, so they are. Next up, we have got the Pego, and I'm going to kind of put the... Well, I'm not. People might say, well, why wouldn't I put the Ichthyornis here? Well, the Ichthyornis actually kind of has a use. It can gather back black pearls and all of that stuff. So, no, it does not deserve to be on the worst Ark Creatures list. And I've been throwing the word useless around, but this is still the worst Ark Creatures list, not the most useless. But they are, in some ways, big synonyms of each other. But the Pego kind of does have one use, which is it can actually gather berries. What am I turning into a northerner now? It can gather berries for you, which is actually quite a nice feature for a creature like this to have. Although you're taming these things on accident, no one's actually going out to tame one of these things the way you tame one. You just put berries in your last like your hotbar, and then it will steal them, and then it will tame. So you can tell how that would happen on accident. And all of my Pego tames have been on accident, and they're really just not useful. They don't do anything. They just sit on your shoulder and do nothing, and there's nothing that you can really do with them. Again, kind of falling into the worst Ark Creatures list. It just doesn't do anything. It can't do anything, and it doesn't really need to do anything because it's not really a big part of the Ark game. It's just a huge annoyance of a creature, and once tamed, you really just can't get anything out of it whatsoever. In number 3, we have got the female Megaloceros. The male one is actually a pretty good thatch gatherer, but the female one cannot attack whatsoever, so it has to be on the list. It is essentially just used to breed Megaloceroses, so then you could get a better male Megaloceros for better thatch gathering. Don't know why my words are not working today, but yeah, this creature is useless apart from that one thing, which is why it's here. It is such a bad Ark creature. You can't do anything with it whatsoever. You can ride it, and you can jump around with it, and you can move around the map with it. It can't attack though, like the Diplo, but at least the Diplo has knockback, and the Diplo is a good berry gatherer. That gives it some merit. This thing just can't do anything. It feels like whenever you press the attack button or something, if you're looking to that, it just feels like this creature hasn't been coded properly, like there's something wrong with it. But no, there is nothing wrong with it, and if you ever tame one of these things, I don't know why you would, unless obviously you're breeding, and you don't know they don't attack, well, now you do, because these things don't attack, so don't tame it unless you're doing breeding. Really, just one of the worst Ark creatures. Why don't you at least give these things an attack? And at number 2, we have got the Compsognathus, or just the Compy. It's called the Compy in Ark. Don't know why I decided to do the whole long fancy name, but hey ho. And this creature can only be tamed with prime meat. Its torpor goes down ridiculously fast, and once tamed, maybe you could send it to attack something slightly. Really just doesn't have a use. And I'm kind of going to put the Listro here as an honourable mention as well, because it follows a similar suit. Again, kind of has a use like the Oviraptor, where it will buff something from your creatures. It will buff the XP. Just, again, for me, really just not a useful creature. You can't get anything out of these things. And number 1 is anything you really tame with the fish traps, as you do tame that creature if you let them out of the fish trap. And I know maybe you might say that's a little bit of a cheat and it doesn't count, but you have tamed it, so it's there. So coelacanths, saber-tooth salmons, trilobites, all of those things, the worst Ark Tame just by far. Like, honestly, you can't use these things for anything. They're just there. Obviously, you can use them when in a fish basket to tame a Shadowmane. That's kind of nice. But you can't when they're out in this form, so that's why they're in at the #1 spot. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you enjoyed this one. Did I miss any creatures? If I did, comment down below your top 10 worst Ark creatures, or just your least favourite Ark creature. And with that, I'll see you all later.